So in a way, my name, I was kind of like named as a Buddhist from the very young age, even before I was born. But I always joke that it was better than the alternative, because the other name that my parents were thinking of was Yao Han, which the older generation Singaporeans would know is the name of a supermarket. It's like calling your son like Red Mart or Fair Price, that kind of thing. So Peijing was actually a very good name that was given to me. And I just want to caveat at the start, right, that I'm not a stream winner or anything. All I'm sharing is just my personal perspective. So treat the information that you are about to see, right, with the skepticism that you have when you go on tour and the tour guides like make all these ridiculous claims, right? Go and Google and go and read up for yourself as well after this. All I intended to do from this was just to share like my personal perspective of my practice. And I originally thought of calling the talk Buddhism and Barbells, but I realized that not many people will understand like where I'm coming from, and they would think I'm trying to encourage you to go and get stronger. But the reason why I was thinking of like the original title of like Buddhism and Barbells is because that on a personal level, on the physical level, actually I'm doing like barbell strength training, and the more I investigate into physiology and like strength training, the more I realize that actually there's a lot of parallels to Dhamma. It's all about cause and effect, right? But I realized that if I went that approach, right, I'll very quickly lose people. And when I was doing the partial rains retreat with Ajahn Brahm, just earlier last month actually, towards the end of the retreat, when it was very clear that I was about to leave, and I got this text from Sister Hui Kim of like, Brother PJ, what's your topic? And then I just meditated, and the thought came up like, okay, how about how to practice like one person's perspective? So the contents actually came out from the end of the 2-week partial rains retreat I sent, and hopefully this helps to give inspiration to people on how to practice the Dhamma. Normally I don't actually ask my loved ones to come, but today I actually asked my parents and my wife to turn up, because it will be the last time I'll be giving a Dhamma talk for quite a while. So hopefully this will be helpful. And also it's also in a way a form of like to show gratitude. And as you have the saying that the gift of Dhamma is the highest gift, and usually they are not here, so I hope to actually share with them like what actually I've been doing all this time. So if I were to start with where's the slides? Okay, very good. So if I were to start with the slides, right, I actually will share about this sutta, which a lot of Buddhist groups use. They always quote this. It's from the Samyutta Nikaya number 2, and this is a discussion between the Buddha and Ananda, where Ananda talks about like, whole good friends, right, it's like half of the holy life. Then the Buddha actually says, no, actually it's the whole of the holy life. But one thing that you will notice, right, is that most people don't actually cover the rest of the sutta, right? So there's a lot of focus in a lot of Buddhist societies of this is the whole of the holy life is a good friend, so we should be cultivating friendship. But if you read the rest of the sutta, actually, what the Buddha actually says is, sorry, do you mind if I shoot this so I can actually see this well? Yeah, sorry, I can't remember my own slides. So when a Buddha has a good friend, it is to be expected that he will develop and cultivate the rest of the Eightfold Path, right? And then the Buddha talks about how do you cultivate, how does a good friend actually do that, right? And that is through encouraging you to actually walk the Eightfold Path. And the important part in that sutta actually is that the Buddha refers to himself as that good friend. It is not about friendship amongst each other that's important. It is actually your relationship to understanding what the Buddha actually taught that is important. It's your relationship with monks who are actually much more progressed on the path, who truly understand like all the various attainments, can clarify your doubts on that. That is the kind of friendship that's important. So it's sad to say, I'm sorry to all the BF Exco members, it's not just about the friendships that you have, but actually your relationship with actually the teachings, actually the Dhamma, that's actually important. And the other elaboration is another sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, where there's a causal sequence, right, where the Buddha actually talks about it. Like, you associate with good persons, and then that becomes full, right? Then that fills up hearing the good Dhamma, and then that becomes full. That fills up like a saddha, which is translated as faith, but I prefer the word trust or confidence, right? Confidence become full, then you fill up careful attention, yoniso manasikara, right? Which I'll talk about a little bit more. With careful attention becoming full, then you fill up like sati sampajana, right? Mindfulness and clear comprehension. Both awareness of like what you're doing, but also why are you doing something, right? And that becoming full, you fill up the restraint of the sense faculties. And this is an important point. Sense faculties restraints, right? It is actually linked to the earlier slide where you talk about seclusion, right? You're secluding, your sense faculties. Then that actually fills up the three kinds of good conduct, which is good conduct of body, speech, and mind. That then fills up the four focuses of mindfulness, the four satipatthana, which is that the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness for sense experience, mindfulness of your mind, as well as the dhammas. The four satipathanas becoming full, then fills up actually the 7 factors of enlightenment, which includes Sama Samadhi, the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path, which invariably in the suttas refers to the 4 jhanas. That becoming full then fills up true knowledge and liberation, right? That becoming full, you're fully enlightened. And the Buddha gives a beautiful simile, right? That it's just as though that when it's raining, and Singapore has got plenty of rain, you can see this everywhere, right? Rain pours down in thick droplets on the mountaintop. You go Bukit Timah Hill, you can see the same thing. Water flows down along the slope. Then it fills up all these like creeks. Those become full, then fill up the pools. Then those become full, and so on and so forth. It's this very causal sequence, and that actually is an important point to emphasize. So when you are talking about good friendship, right, you have to focus on actually this point of understanding what actually is the right Dhamma, actually, and how do you actually like cultivate that good friends and actually like hear the good Dhamma, right? The way that I do this personally is actually that I learned the suttas by reading them. And we are actually in a very lucky time now where good translations are readily available. Ajahn Sujato in Bodhinyana Monastery has put up on Sutta Central, so you see all those links, and feel free to just take the QR codes and link. Those are the links to those websites. Those are very good translations by Ajahn Sujato, free. For the entire Pali canon, you can actually go and read up themselves. The other thing that Ajahn Sujato has done that's great is that he has taken the Pali and actually done the comparison tables, right, for what are the parallels in the Chinese. So for those who are bilingual, you can actually see for yourself, like, oh, so this is what the Chinese says, and this is what the Pali English translation says. What are the two? And you'll find that actually there's so much in there that's actually the same thing, more or less the same thing. The other thing also is that I would follow good guidance. So I think Brother Joe mentioned that I was exposed to Ajahn Brahm, truly during that executive retreat in 2010. On the way back to Singapore, it was my good karma that I actually shared the same flight, and literally we were seated on the same row as Ajahn Brahm. And Angie, then the BF president, very kindly actually asked me to sit next to Ajahn Brahm. And so, to Ajahn Brahm's chagrin, I was asking him a lot of Dhamma questions the whole time. But one of the things I remember asking him was, how do I even start? Because the suttas are when you go to the BF library, you see, right, it's like middle length discourses, long discourses, connected discourses, numerical discourses, and it literally fills up like 1.5 feet on the shelf already, right? So you're like, wow, where do you start with this whole thing? And Ajahn Brahm actually said something. He said that, there are these good translations, just start anywhere. What's important is actually that you start. And he also added, right, and I have to confess, at that point in time, I thought that it sounded like conceit on his part. He said, and what you can do is that you can go to the BSWA, Buddhist Society of Western Australia's website. There are all these sutta talks that he gives every second and fourth Sunday of the month at 3 p.m. So he said, you're going to listen to those talks and you can follow it as guidance for like explaining what the suttas are. Initially, I thought that he was being a bit like conceitful because he said, "Oh, those are probably the best." But now that I've actually investigated it a lot further, what I've come to realize is that both the three Ajahns in BSWA, Ajahn Brahm, Ajahn Brahmali, Ajahn Sujato, they don't just take like what is written in the Pali at face value. They actually have done a lot of their own research, working with monks like Venerable Analayo. Ajahn Brahmali works very closely with Bhikkhu Bodhi directly to actually see what is coming out from the latest research in early Buddhism and what then can be incorporated into the Dhamma practice straight away. Simple example I can share is that a very frequent mistranslation of the first jhana is you talk about Vitakka Vichara, and that is frequently translated into English as thought and applied attention. Vitakka tends to be translated as thought because in Pali it means thought and others. But interestingly enough, you look at the Chinese translation, right? And you can go and see this for yourself at Sutta Central. When they talk about the first jhana, Chu Chan, right? The character for Vitakka is not the usual one that they translated that means thought. The Chinese character that they use to represent thought as Vitakka is Xun, like to search or direction, right? When they talk about the jhanas, the character they use for that is actually Jue, which is like just awareness. So this actually means very clearly, it's a very different understanding, right? Which then unfortunately has led to a very bad situation where a lot of people now in the Buddhist world still talk about first jhana, there's thought, because they go, see, the sutta says there's thoughts. When in actual fact, what that Vitakka means, right, is actually more that it's actually the movement of the mind, the awareness of the pleasure, and your mind is kind of like moving towards it, but it's not thought. And this is something that Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Brahmali, by looking at the translations, by looking at the comparisons, looking at Venerable Analayo's work, they're able to say that actually, this is where there's a mistake. The other thing they've also done is that they've done a lot of comparative analysis between the suttas with actually the later Pali works. And I don't know this for a fact, but I know a friend who studies Pali. He said that actually the Pali from either the suttas, the original text, Abhidhamma and the Vinaya, as well as the gathas, the poems, right, are very distinct. And he made the analogy that it's as though that you have got legal English with Shakespearean English, with Old English, and what you see on Facebook. And it's literally like a world of a difference. And he said that actually and what the monks have done is actually that they have then used that understanding to actually tease through the Pali canon and see actually which parts of the suttas actually maybe there's some question about whether the language used is real or not. And this is actually very helpful because it helps you actually tease out actually what really is more likely, right, that the Buddha actually taught versus later additions by a lot of the Sri Lankan venerables in the 1st, 2nd century AD. So that kind of guidance, right, is actually very, very important to then tease out actually what is important and what's not important for you to practice. One consequence of that is actually that I don't really pay any importance to so-called like vipassana practice, because you realize that actually this whole concept of vipassana versus samatha is a later creation. It's actually not what the Buddha actually taught. And if you look at actually the suttas, there's only one particular section in the entire Pali canon where the Buddha explicitly uses the words samatha and vipassana. Otherwise, he keeps talking of Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path, Eightfold Path, Eightfold Path. 8 factor of the Eightfold Path, 4 jhanas. With 4 jhanas, then you can see things as they truly are. When you don't have the 4 jhanas, the insight that you have, right, will be corrupted by delusion to some degree. Right. Once you have like proper samadhi, right, the 5 hindrances are knocked out, you can really see things as they truly are. But without the 8 factor of the Eightfold Path, it's really quite hard for you to do so. So it is a little bit that the way I would compare it, right, is that, imagine that your task is that you're supposed to dig a deep hole, right? And the deepest hole, right, is actually that of like Nibbana, right? Somebody gives you a toothpick and tells you that you can go ahead and like dig this. And if you try digging a hole with a toothpick, you know how hard it is, right? The moment you dig, right, the soil goes back, right? It's literally a never-ending task. The other way, right, is that, okay, I give you the tools, right, to build a shovel, and then you dig using the shovel. That actually is probably the closest approximate I can think of, right, between if you just apply vipassana, right, as is frequently taught, versus actually applying, you focus on the samatha part, you focus on the jhanas, you get real deep jhanas through letting go, not by trying to grasp, then you actually like get to the true liberation. So it's important to actually like cultivate this right understanding by getting the right sources. The other important part that tends to be forgotten in our day and age, right, is actually that of recitation, right? So I actually purposely picked out this excerpt from the sutta, right, where if you see the part in red, right, it talks about how good friendship will nourish your ethical conduct, sense restraint nourishes the spiritual life, but then it also talks that recitation actually nourishes learning, right? So if I were to just do a very quick test, okay, just shout out, okay, what's the first factor of the Eightfold? Okay, how many of you, right, know the Eightfold Path and you can recite every factor of the Eightfold Path, including the component parts? How many of you? Confident. Heng Xuan, you confirm. Okay, one person will be able to, but how many of us would be able to? And then the question I have to ask is this: if you don't really know the component parts, right, how sure are you that you're practicing the right thing? Right? When you don't know, right, you can't really judge and say that, oh, actually, am I doing the right thing or not? And this whole point of recitation is something that I have to self-confess is something that's quite recent for me. And so the Metta Sutta, right, is something that what I made your chance just now is something that I have started doing on a regular basis, on a daily basis a couple of months ago, because I realized that it stemmed from disagreement that I had with my wife, and then after that I was quite agitated and I was like, how is this a good thing, right? And that's when I realized that, oh, actually maybe I should put more focus on truly understanding like what is the Dhamma and actually like maybe recite this on a regular basis. And by reciting, I don't mean just listening to the recordings. My personal experience has been that you just listen, right? It's parts of it will stick, but when you practice recitation, that's when you realize, oh, actually I've forgotten this part. Oh, actually I've forgotten that part, and so on and so forth. So like an example is the Metta Sutta just now that we're reciting. When I started the practice of recitation, I realized that I actually mess up the parts altogether, and I will miss out like large parts of the Metta Sutta. And you need to actually practice such that you gain the awareness, oh, something's not quite right. Then you go back and practice that particular part, And having the Dhamma, parts of the Dhamma in your mind, right, then also allows you to eventually develop the right view and then to actually act on it. Right view, right, is only perfected when you have finished you have actually like developed the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. You actually gain the knowledge and the insight, right, and then you have some liberation, and that liberation you have is the removal of any doubt in the Dhamma, the removal of the sense of self, and then you actually gain like the full right view. But you can actually still practice developing right view now, getting the right sources that I mentioned, but also to realize that there is such a thing as an objective truth. You can actually do something about this. This excerpt is taken from many parts in the sutta. In Majjhima Nikaya 41, this is what is inside as well. So this is the excerpt, right? He has right view, undistorted vision thus. There is what is given and what is offered and what is sacrificed. There is fruit and result of good and bad actions, meaning there is cause, there is an effect. There's this world, there's the other world, there's mother, there's father, there are beings who are reborn spontaneously, which I always found very interesting. I'm not sure whether they're referring to chatbots, but I don't think that's the case. There are good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have realized by themselves direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. The very important thing, right, is that when you have got this, if you truly believe in cause and effect, right, that means, right, just knowing is not enough. You have to do something about it, right? So what I mentioned just now was that you have to recite, and so you have the knowledge, but then after you know already, right, it's as though that you are somebody who knows everything, but you have acted on nothing on that, right? It's like going to a restaurant and like just eating the menu but not the food, right? The real fruit of the knowledge, right, lies in you actually acting on this. So you actually have to act, and that progresses to the next path of the Eightfold Path, right, which is like right motivation and intention, Samma Sankappa. The important thing is actually that the three component parts of Samma Sankappa, this is absolutely critical, not just for your meditation, but actually for good results in your life. Renunciation, nekkhamma, making peace, kindness, or rather like non-ill will is probably the more accurate translation, right? Non-cruelty, avihimsa, or the Sanskrit Hindi version is ahimsa, which Mahatma Gandhi made famous. Versus, you grasp and you take up things. Oh, that person made that comment about LGBT on Facebook. He's wrong. Why is he wrong? You're already taking up already, right? The moment you got any kind of the interesting thing about Buddhism is cause and effect, right? The moment that you examine the effects, right, there's a cause. And you can always find what is the causal link to it. Right. So the moment there's an effect of some ill will and so forth, right, then you can go back to the root cause. That's that taking up. You made it yours. You took up that thing. But if you treat it as though that, oh, actually it's not my problem, it's actually not my thing, he's free to his own view, or you fully trust, let things be, it's not my problem, I don't have to worry about it, then that's like letting go, right? You're taking up things, that's the cause of it. The development of anger, ill will, and cruelty, those are actually the wrong motivations. The other thing that I should actually comment on as well, right, is that one key insight that I have from learning the Dhamma is the Dhamma is actually not in the five sense world. What I mean by this is that the Buddhist Fellowship Center here, the 4 holy places that you go on pilgrimage, the Buddha's relics, Buddha statues like the one behind me, these are not the Dhamma. Dhamma, these are actually like the fruit, so to speak. Dhamma is entirely within each and every one of you. And what I mean by that is this, the Buddha's key insight, right, is actually that suffering, right, is the result of your internal mind reaching out and trying to control the world and trying out to grasp things. Two analogies to help illustrate what I mean, right? If you imagine the mind, right, as this bucket, right, and mindfulness, right, it means that your mind is full, the bucket is full. In reality, most of us, right, our buckets, right, have a lot of holes. And the mindfulness is leaking out, right, into different parts. Netflix lah, to iPhones lah, to Facebook lah, even to the Buddhist Fellowship, to whatever matters, even to, actually this is, the wrong thing they're doing in Myanmar and so on and so forth. It's going out into all these things. But when you actually reach to enlightenment, right, what has happened is that you have completely stopped all the holes. Your mind is no longer leaking out, right? It's actually contained inside. The other analogy is from Ajahn Kemavaru at Wat Buddha Dhamma in Sydney. He likened the mind, right, to being the most powerful gigawatt power generator. But what has happened, right, is that the power generator has got a lot of stolen, short circuits. As a result of which, right, you have a lot of power, but actually it's leaking all over the place, and it's not actually focused on where the main causes of suffering are, which is inside you, right? And once you truly recognize this, right, you come to realize that actually the five sense world, yes, you will have to plan. In the words of Ajahn Kemavaro also, he said that contentment never led to more sales, right? And revenues don't increase by themselves, right? So there's a lot of planning that happens in the five sense world, but those are things that actually detract you from your own internal happiness. So once you realize that actually that the causes of happiness and all that is actually internally within you, that's when you start to develop nibbida towards the five sense world. You start to realize that actually all these, things, right? Even dealing with like exco and all that stuff, right? Or even Dhamma practices and so forth, right? Dhamma events, right, are actually five sense world practices. You can actually live contentedly, secluded from all those by just like focusing on your own practice and actually cultivating the contentment. Everything that you have is actually extra. So once you realize that actually forms a view, right, that helps you grow on the practice that would lead towards a simplification, right? The letting go of things, the being kind and being gentle to everything, right? And that also then allows you to apply this nekama, the avyapada, avihimsa, right, towards the rest of the Eightfold Path. Action, speech, livelihood. Right action would be that you don't kill. And my wife and I, when we first started this policy of not killing any living beings in our home, it was a bit challenging for us because we had an ant problem right next to my bed, literally, by the windowsill. But I was telling my wife, we just let it be, And the interesting thing is that once you don't treat it as your problem, things kind of solve themselves. So now we have this mini spider colony that have popped up because they're just feeding on the ants. And I mean, it's not like my bad karma, because I'm just like, okay, it's just like nature taking its course. I'm not doing anything. But then the ant problem has disappeared because there's that ecology that's like taking place by itself. Right? So we are very careful when we vacuum the windowsill not to suck up both. Like we suck up all the dead ants, but we try to avoid killing the spiders. The other one would be like not stealing. Also like no sexual misconduct, or if you are already like very enlightened, then you'll be like complete celibacy. And then the factors of like speech, right? No false speech, no malicious speech, right? Don't try to divide people. If you can, don't say anything in those situations. No harsh speech. Personally, that's like one of my developmental area, to use a workplace lingo. And the last one is actually like no idle chatter. And if you go to the Salayaka Sutta, there is an additional 3 mental acts that wholesome mental acts that the Buddha recommended, which is to actually like avoid desire, covetousness. Oh, that guy got a promotion. Why is it that I don't have a promotion? I want a promotion. Or I really like your watch, Vincent. Can I have your watch? That kind of like covetousness, right? The other one is like ill will, to avoid that ill will, the anger that arises. And the third mental wholesome act is actually to develop right view, which is what I covered in that paragraph earlier. And then there's the whole point about like livelihood. This is where actually in the suttas, it has not been very helpful. A lot of parts of the suttas where the Buddha talks about right livelihood, he basically says that, you just avoid wrong livelihood. Then you're like, okay, isn't that like a bit of a circle? Then what's wrong livelihood? It's like, that's like not right livelihood. Yeah, but what Ajahn Brahmali shared was this sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 17, right? It's called the Jungle Thickets. And he shared that this is actually a very good framework for you to think about how to choose your livelihood. In this particular sutta, what the Buddha advised, right, was that if you have a monk, right, that goes to a place and he has got very good meditation, so he looks at 2 things. One is the state of your meditation and your mental state. Are there more wholesome, mental states or unwholesome mental states? The other one is actually that, your physical conditions. Are you getting a lot of alms food? All your requisites are all covered for, and so on and so forth. And the Buddha basically said that you look at these two categories, right? The important thing, right, is not the requisites. The important thing, right, is actually that you look at your mental state. Are you having more wholesome mental states or more unwholesome mental states? If you have got more unwholesome mental states increasing, whether your physical conditions are met or not, leave that place immediately, go to somewhere else. That's what the Buddha recommended in this particular sutta. And Ajahn Brahmali very brilliantly then said that this is actually comparable to people choosing your jobs. If you're in a job, right, that, oh, you're in there every day, you cannot tekan, and you're just like, oh my God, this is terrible. Or you're in a job like I was in the investment bank, right, where I realized that everybody there, A, hates their job. Everybody there was like planning and plotting about like where to go next. B, nobody found meaning in their job. Everybody's like, oh, this is so pointless. And C, what triggered for me was this associate director telling me, she said, you know, PJ, I can never travel in anything less than business class on the airlines, and I can never stay in a hotel less than 5-star. And I was completely horrified. I was like, why is that the case? Then she said, because I'm too used to it already. And that's when I was like, okay, investment banking is super samsara. I have to get out as soon as possible. But that is kind of like the guidance. And then you see all the unwholesome like states that arise because of that. In contrast, where I am now when I first joined, okay, with the adjustment period, there was a lot of suffering and all that. But what I saw really heartened me, you know, where I got colleagues who genuinely help each other out. I got bosses who cared for like, actually each and every single member in their teams. You know, I got people who, there's a lot of generosity of spirit, you know, within colleagues, and it's not as though that, oh, this person is a secretary and that person is a chairman, and then they will still go out for lunches together. And I was like, this is actually a very wholesome place. You know, there's the sign of the camaraderie, there's care, there is a lot of the right, you know, motivations there. So those will be kind of examples of what I would encourage you to look out for in a place for like right livelihood. And then right effort. Broadly, this is about increasing wholesome mental states and actually decreasing unwholesome mental states. A very important thing, right, I would say, is to choose the right partner in life. And if you are choosing for your next life, also choose the right parents. No, it's true. You think it's beyond your control, but actually that's actually what happens. You actually choose your own parents. And I must say that I've been very lucky that I've chosen great parents that I have, right? Both my parents are there. I'm immensely indebted to them. They have been, as what the Buddha says, your parents are your first teachers. And I'm a bit shameful to admit this one episode that happened in my life when I was still a young male, so a bit damaged in the head, you know, by hormones and not too sensible. I was, before my executive retreat, I was actually a wine drinker. So I used to drink a lot of wine. I used to collect wines and so forth. And there was one time that, I don't know whether my parents still remember, but I remember it vividly. There was one time when I got into this big fight with the two of them, where I basically said, okay, for my birthday present, I want a wine cooler and a wine fridge. Yeah. And to the credit of my parents, they basically said, no. If you want to, you save up by yourself. If you eventually you go and work, you can spend your money however you like. But in this household, no, I'm not going to encourage this kind of like spendthrift behavior. And now that I'm like walking in the path of Dhamma, I was like, oh, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Right? That's like the best thing that ever, right? Yeah, and it's been, but also like how my parents have been like exceptionally kind. All my friends, whenever they meet my parents, they always say that, oh, your parents are really like, you know, kind and very generous and really go all out the way to help people. And that's something I've like, truly experienced. I'm really grateful for. But I think also that they have also been very kind in teaching me aspects of Dhamma which sometimes they don't even remember. So a lot of people, myself included, when you meditate, right, you have a tendency to want to control your mind. Don't think distracting thoughts, you know, and then like do this, don't do that, and so on and so forth. My parents have always taken the approach of they'll explain to you why something needs to be done, and then they would actually just let me make my own decisions. And there were the few times that I've thrown tantrums. I was telling my mom, there's one time I threatened to commit suicide when I was like 5 years old. I remember taking a knife and then my mom was like, why do you want to do this? We're taking care of you. And she said she doesn't remember, but she was like, why do you want to do this? We're taking care of you, and so on and so forth. And I remember holding a knife. I was like, yeah, why am I so stupid? So I put down the knife. There's another time I threw a tantrum in a department store, and my mom, all she did was just smile at me and go, why are you doing this? We already buy you a lot of things, like, do you really want this? Let's talk about this another time. You're just embarrassing yourself. And I saw everybody looking at me in the department store, and I was like, yeah, she's right. I'm embarrassing myself. So there's been a lot of like this kind of teachings, that I remember from my parents' parenting style that has been very influential, right? It's really set me on the right path of life. And of course, like I already mentioned, like my father giving me the name Peijing, And I shared this with Ajahn Brahmali. He said, that's a brilliant name for a Buddhist, like to cultivate spirituality, to cultivate purity. But also choosing the right partner in life, right? I think that is absolutely critical. I've been very lucky to choose the right partner. To just share quite openly, my wife has been very supportive of my practice. She allowed me to disappear for 2 weeks, in Jhana Grove by myself. Even though we have got a cat that's half blind and requires like constant care, and like doing all the housework by herself and so forth. But I think more importantly is that in my wife, I have found a true Kalyana Mitta. Somebody who acts as though that if I were to put myself in a monastery, right, it's like, if you understand the Vinaya, a lot of the rules in the Vinaya requires you to find somebody to confess to. So for example, if you are a monk and you broke one of the Pachittiya rules, right, one of which is actually that you're not supposed to eat at the improper time. So if you eat after the solar noon, for example, you're supposed to find another monk to confess because you're breaking one of the rules. And the purpose of that, right, is not to punish. There's actually zero punishment in the Vinaya. In one of the suttas, the king Bibimsara actually compared himself with the Buddha. They were exactly the same age. And he told the Buddha, it's amazing. I, as a king, right, have the right to execute people on my order. I say something, that person will be dead, And yet, when I'm like having my council of ministers, right, I'm getting interrupted left, right, center. People are just not allowing me to finish my speech. But in your Sangha, you have got zero rules of zero punishment. But yet, when you as the Buddha are speaking, even if a monk actually just clears his throat, right, another monk would nudge him and tell him, hey, shh, you're quiet. And there's like zero punishment in that. It's literally just, you just confess. And the purpose of the confession is actually to help you reduce your conceit. And this confession and this transparency is something that I would encourage everybody to actually have that with your partner. If you can develop that trust, that contentment, and to actually create this non-judging situation where you feel free enough to confess that I have done this transgression by body, speech, or mind. And my wife has been the perfect partner for me to actually like just be very open and just say that, even simple things like, for example, that if I have got like, if say that at work, for example, that I found myself attracted to this particular person, I would tell her, this particular person has just come to the workplace. I found this person to be very attractive. And then I would actually use her as the accountability tool, right, person, right, to tell her that what I will do to ensure that sexual misconduct will never happen. Once you have this kind of partnership, right, it's incredibly powerful for your spiritual practice because you actually have somebody to confess to, somebody to help guide you along the way as well, on the Dhamma as well. Yeah, and I think that even during the silent retreat I spent in Jhana Grove, there were moments when I was actually like worrying about home and texting her. And what actually helped me to really focus on my own practice was her texting me and said that, why don't you focus on being silent for the actual retreat and you don't have to text me, everything's fine at home, right? And that was like this huge relief of mine. I was able to then go and focus on the meditation. But having the right partner is absolutely critical. The other thing also I mentioned related to this, actually like developing humility. And this one, and radical transparency. This one, if I were to use an example of the Buddha, so I got the two QR codes there. Those are actual situations recorded in the suttas where the Buddha himself actually asked the monks at the end of the rains retreat and said, have I done any transgression? Is there anything I've done that you should admonish? Please admonish me. If I were to just paint it in a different context, go and examine any other religion in the world, right? You don't have such a thing, where you got a founder of a practice, right, saying that, please come and admonish me. If any of you watch Netflix and you've watched this documentary called Wild Wild Country, it's about the Rajneesh, this Osho, OSHO, you can find his books in the bookstores everywhere. That particular documentary shows a situation of a founder of a sect and how he has become completely engrossed in his own mind, and there's zero humility. But the Buddha has set this beautiful example of, I am the Buddha, but please admonish me if I have to. And that's because that admonishment, right, inviting people to critique you so they can improve better, right, is so important. If you apply that in a modern workday context, the Buddha is basically asking for feedback. And you think about your own workplace context, right? Without feedback, how do you grow? If people don't admonish you, how do you know that, actually this is some area that I have to improve on and not, right? So this is actually something that the humility, the inviting people, the ability to say sorry, and then to actually do something about it is so important in this path. The other thing also is that after the Buddha came out of his enlightenment, he basically realized that he has this degree of knowledge, right, that is beyond any being, right, whether human or devas, right, in this world. And he basically reflected, it's very uncomfortable to have no person to respect and venerate. There's no teacher, there's no guru. But then what he realized was that actually this Dhamma is actually what I need to hold up. And so if you read the suttas in various episodes, very often the only times that the Buddha actually speaks up to critique, to defend something is when the aspect of the Dhamma is wrongly presented or something. Then he'll go in to clarify. So he actually holds the Dhamma. We always say we pay respect to the triple gem of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. In reality, the Buddha himself actually saw it more as the Dhamma and the Sangha. Right? He saw himself as actually that I've rediscovered this old path, but actually he held the Dhamma above everything else. So that is actually the reason why, right, for our practice, we should actually cultivate this humility and remove the conceit and to be as transparent as possible. And that actually is very helpful for cultivating right effort. The last thing actually to cultivate sense restraint and by careful attention. So I mentioned I'll talk a bit more about this. I strongly recommend that you go to this particular link because these are very, very short one-liner suttas. But the Buddha explains, right, what are the causes for different things. What's the cause, right, for you to develop this strong sensual desire? And that cause, right, is because that you're focusing on the beautiful things. When you see a beautiful girl that comes in, right, then you have this lust that will come up. And the lust comes out, right, because you're focusing on, say for example, her hair is very beautiful. You're just focusing on the hair. But you're not looking at the whole package to see, what about her pimples? What about her toenails? What about her nose hair? Right? You're not focusing on any of all these. Conversely, when you are angry, it's because you're focusing on the things that displease you. You're actually picking, your mind is actually going out to, this guy, his nose hair too long. For those who are offended, I'm sorry, I haven't cut my nose hair, but yeah, nose hair too long, I better go and trim, And that's exactly what's happening. The fault-finding mind is actually looking for something to pick fault with, and then that actually is the trigger for you to then become unhappy. So yoniso manasikara literally means to go to the causes of it. When you're angry, right, all you can really do, right, is to remove yourself, or even when your mind's default with lust, right, all you can really do is to remove yourself from that situation and just let your mind calm down. That's pretty much all you can do, actually. To let the whole thing very gradually subside with kindness. Don't try to force it. But then you should always ask yourself, what was the cause of this effect? What did I pay attention to that caused this mental defilement to come up? And this whole bunch of suttas will explain the causes for that. And once you realize this, right, then you exercise sense restraint. Sense restraint is not the three monkeys of, I don't hear, I don't see, I don't say anything. That's not sense restraint. Sense restraint is understanding what you paid attention to. And then next time that the situation happens, you do better, right? You look at somewhere else. So I apologize first to all the ladies that I tend to pick out. I adopted Ajahn Brahm's trick of like looking out for pimples and looking out for flaws. I've realized that I make some ladies very uncomfortable because I'll be staring at something that they're very self-conscious on. But it's a very deliberate attempt on my part to actually ensure that sexual misconduct will never ever happen, right? And same thing, and if I were to apply this to the workplace, right, it's actually very interesting how Dhamma applied to the workplace is super powerful. This careful attention, right, is something that if you reflect on your own daily experience at work, whether you're a manager, especially if you're a middle manager, which I am, you will look at the subordinates, right, and the tendency to try to pick fault. And I realized this in myself, that my tendency was to actually I was already inclined towards finding what is it that they didn't do right. And then when I look upwards at the bosses, same thing, all the complaints they should have done this, they shouldn't have done that, and so on and so forth. But once I flipped it around and I realized that actually my tendency is veering me towards ill will, I should actually pay attention to what are the good things to counterbalance this, right? I start looking for the strengths in the people underneath me. I start looking for the strengths in the bosses that I have above them, and to focus on that. It's really life-changing and quite amazing how that opens up a whole slate of opportunities. People surprise you in the most pleasant ways. I got bosses whom initially when I first had a relationship, I was like, wow, this person super kanchong spider. But after focusing on that person's strengths, you come to appreciate better what that person can do. The working relationship becomes better. The work results become so much better as a result of that. And same thing with the subordinates as well. And it all goes back to Yoniso Manasikara. Yeah. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. The five sense world, right, is not the problem. The problem is your own world, how you see things. And that's why right effort is so important. And once you've gotten right effort, right, largely out of the way, right, that's when you can then progress to the 7 and 8 factor. So this one is still very much work in progress, I must admit. I don't get jhanas on a regular basis. If I was, I'll be a non-returner. So still very much work in progress. But the important thing, right, is actually to have the consistency of the practice. Always make time to just sit down and have that right intentions of kindness, letting go and making peace, and non-cruelty. No matter how long, can be 5 minutes, can be 10 minutes, just make sure that every day you sit at least once. For me, that has worked wonders. To the extent that my wife knows when I have not meditated. She'll be like, you seem a bit grumpy. Have you meditated today? Yeah. Then if you think of the daily sits, right, in our daily life as they are like the food warmer, The retreats, right, are like the pressure cookers. They allow you to really bring your practice really in depth. It's only when you're in the retreat situation that say that I was in Jhana Grove, right? Not really a lot of phone reception and all that stuff. And then you get confronted with lust. You get confronted with ill will that comes out of nowhere. You get confronted with all these thoughts, and you're like, I should be enjoying the peace and quiet. How come I'm thinking about work and all these things and thinking about home and so forth, right? It's only in that situation, right, that you then actually get to really work with your defilements, to really understand and actually what are to use the Pali term anusaya, the underlying tendencies, right, that I can't really see because in daily life there's so much noise, but in a real retreat setting you can truly see it for yourself. The best analogy I can think of to illustrate my point, right, is that it's actually that of background noise. If you have a sparrow that goes outside the window now and starts chirping, right, I'm pretty sure very few of us will actually realize it, right? Because there's that background noise of the traffic, there's the background noise of the aircon, the fan, and so forth, and people rustling and so forth. That's your everyday life. But once you go into a retreat center, and this is my personal experience, you can be meditating, watching your breath very quietly, right? A bird will literally go, cheep, 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 and you'll be like, wow, that was super loud. But that's because you're in a situation where the background noise is removed. And that's when you can truly then see actually what is what are the real defilements. So that's actually retreats. Very important. Every year for me, I will go at least once. And how to meditate, right? Important thing is just to focus on the right motivation and intention. People always talk about, oh, I've got loving kindness meditation, the 16 steps of Anapanasati. You first look and control and see the short breath, then you focus on the long breaths, and so on and so forth. In reality, that's not how it is practiced. The Buddha actually just talked about like the second factor of the Eightfold Path. He did talk about all the steps, but I think there are a lot of interpretations like lost in translation. Right? Just make peace, be kind, and be gentle. That's all you have to do. Make peace, be kind, be gentle, and meditation is a natural process. Once you make enough peace and kindness and gentleness, your mind very naturally will run out of steam, just as though that when you lift your foot off the pedal, the car will very naturally come to a stop. Once it comes to a stop, right, and the mind starts to calm down, your breath is the only thing that's moving. If your heartbeat comes up, that means that you're actually focusing on something that's exciting you already. Without that, right, actually it's literally just the breath. And then your mind will very naturally realize that, wow, this is so interesting. When your mind is very coarse, right, you think that the breath is super boring. It's like, in and out, here we go again. But when your mind actually has calmed down enough, right, the background noise has disappeared, it's very enjoyable to watch. Your mind wants to watch it. And then once your mind wants to watch it, the joy comes up, right? That actually becomes the causal factor for you to actually have that mindfulness. And it's very easy for you to move on to the rest of it. And it's just a natural process. The jhanas are not attainments, which is the translation, which is unfortunate. The 4 jhanas are characterized by things that you lose. The first jhana, which the Buddha has described as the ending of the world as you know it, because that's the first time your mind truly experiences the disappearance of the 5 senses. 5 senses completely gone, right? Sound is a thorn to the first jhana because if someone shouts like, get out, for example, right, it can still penetrate in and still get you out of it, the first jhana, but actually you are actually disappearing, right? First 5 senses have largely disappeared already. Second jhana, your will has completely disappeared. There's no movement whatsoever because your desire, and that's when you actually, after you come out of it, you realize that actually what's the cause for will, and you realize there's a cause that leads to that effect. The third jhana, you have the separation of joy. Joy disappears. You only have pure happiness. Fourth jhana, you have got happiness itself disappearing. You only have this equanimity. And the equanimity is a pleasure that's even higher than that happiness. You have the happiness of no happiness, so to speak. Then the other aspects of it, right, the arupa jhana, so to speak, right, it's characterized by disappearance of other aspects of the mind until when you finish the last one, nirodha samapatti, that's when consciousness itself completely disappears. When you come out of it, you're either fully enlightened or you're a non-returner. It's either of these 2 results. Yeah. So that is actually the path. It is not about attaining. And the concentration word that tends to be the translation for samadhi, right, is very, very unfortunate. The word samadhi, if you ask any Hindi speaker, it connotes actually tranquility, it connotes collectedness. It's not about concentration. I focus. I will use willpower. It's about letting it be, and then very gradually the thing will settle by itself. Yeah. So increasingly my meditation practice is very much about like I just let things be. It's a constant process of letting go. Like, okay, I observe the body. So 5 senses. What is it that's like uncomfortable that I need to let go of? Let go of it. Just let it relax to the max, relax more. Then that will disappear. Then something else will crop up. Okay, just let it go, just relax, just be kind, be gentle. It'll just disappear. Disappear more. Then before you know it, actually the 5 senses, you can't really feel it as much. Then the breathing comes up. Okay, breath is here. Okay, let's just watch the breath. Just let it be. Just be kind, be gentle. Just let it be. Don't have to worry about it. Then very gradually the breath will become more and more subtle. Then before you know it, the breath will disappear. Legs will come up. Then that's when you're like, just let it be already. It's progressing very naturally. So the whole practice, right, of the Eightfold Path, right, is really about letting the control freak disappear. You don't use willpower. You actually just, and the Buddha has this brilliant sutta, right, where he talks about there is no will needed, right, for you to actually get to all these advanced states. It's a cause and effect thing. Once you focus on the causes, the causes being the right intention, letting it be nekkhamma, avyapada, abhihimsa, it will very naturally happen. You don't need to worry about it. The fruit will come in due course, right? And then once you get to that deep states of samadhi, that's when you actually have the insight. You have true knowledge, you have liberation. So all our advice is actually practice wisely. You keep the precepts. Develop a sense for when your mind is going off, whether is it the awareness of your body or your Vedana or your mind, right? Like whether there's some unwholesomeness to it. And then you just keep reviewing and adjusting over time and just practicing the rest of the Eightfold Path. So that's just my advice and pretty much how I practice. And once again, thank you for the opportunity for giving a Dhamma talk. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any questions?
Okay, so thank you very much, Brother PJ. So brothers and sisters, any questions?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Brother PJ. Two questions, if I may.
Sure.
First question is a dead horse. I'm flogging a dead horse.
Flogging the dead horse. Yeah. Okay.
It's you're talking about your one of a wine and the wine cooler. Now, just like wine, just like many other things, a knife, your personal tool, or even water, there's always a good part of it and a bad part of it. Just the knife you can kill, you can use a cut knife. Okay, water you can use it to wash, and then after washing, you don't throw away the water with the baby with the bath bottle. And also your own tools, you can use it for good purpose, or you can use it for bad purpose, sexual misconduct, or use it for procreation. So my question is, why is it we can't use wine wisely and must totally abstain from it? That's my question.
So should I answer that question first?
Yes, answer the question.
Okay. The reason is actually it's actually very simple. With wine, right, and it's not just wine, it's any kind of intoxicant, right? Your mindfulness will diminish significantly, and delusion actually increases as a result. You're not actually awakening as a result of that. You're not seeing things as they truly are. And if I were to throw back a question to you to ask, why is it in your mind, right, you must have wine? So what I mean is that, why is it in your mind, right, wine has to be good? When, if you look at the epidemiology studies, there are some people who look at all the drugs in the world, and they actually say that alcohol is actually the most harmful chemical of any kind of drug, including cocaine, including heroin. Alcohol has the biggest damage, right, of any kind of drug. So I think that the question of also that how would you then know whether you are not just being deluded when you go down that path as well? It's a real thing. The Buddha himself, right, actually in the Vinaya, so in the Vinaya they have got rules, right, and the rules for the monks to not drink alcohol, they actually explain the story for it. And the story actually has that there's this very good monk, right, who is like very skilled in meditation, and he was actually able to, so in the suttas and the Vinaya, there are these beings called nagas who are like very fierce serpent, snake-like beings, right, who can transform and so on and so forth, and they're actually dangerous. So they're considered to be dangerous that you want to avoid. This particular monk, right, actually had an epic battle with a dangerous naga and was able to overcome that naga. Then this same monk went on alms round, and I think there was some mischief that was happening, right? And what happened was that the villagers, right, just kept feeding him alcohol, and the rule then was that you take whatever that is put in your alms bowl. So they just kept putting alcohol in his alms bowl. So he had to drink everything. After he drank everything, he basically lay down, right, completely like knocked out, right, and his feet were facing the Buddha. And then the Buddha like looked at him and then addressed the monks and said that, so this monk, he was previously fighting this Naga. Do you think he can even fight a lizard at this point in time? And then the monk said no. So then the Buddha laid down the rule, right? And it's with alcohol, actually, when you consume it, the intoxication, your mindfulness is a lot reduced. The chance for you to actually break all your other precepts increases tremendously. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, you can read all the cases of like sexual misconduct and all that. A lot of times there's alcohol that's involved in it, right? For that reason.
Okay, but many research have shown that red wine is good for the heart, and even doctors ask their patient, please go and drink some wine every day.
So that one is actually not true. The latest studies have shown that actually there is a correlation between the socio-economic classes. So the people who actually drink wine tend to be higher socio-economic classes. So they already have better healthcare and so forth already. That tends to actually be the case. So there is, I would actually say that the jury is not entirely out on that particular aspect. But I mean, I actually think that for me personally, I quit alcohol after I went for the executive retreat, right? And on the way there, I passed by this Chang beer advertisement, and I was like, oh, I could use a beer. I was very stressed out at work. Then on the way back, right, I passed by a Chang beer advertisement, and I was like, actually, I got zero desire. Why is it the case? And that's when I realized, right, actually, a lot of it was actually in my mind. A lot of the alcohol is good, right? It's all your social conditioning. Your friends telling you is great. This kind of reports, right, which actually oftentimes are sponsored by people with vested interests, right, telling you that it's great and fantastic. It's healthy for you. You should drink more of it. Yeah, what's wrong with this? A little bit of alcohol won't do anything. Then the question that you ask yourself is that, okay, a little bit of alcohol won't harm, right? But then what exactly is the level that you draw? Everybody's slightly different. So I think that ultimately, I'm not going to say that you should. I would encourage everyone to keep 5 precepts, but I think that this is where it's very clear in the suttas that the Buddha actually talks about how this is it increases the chances of like misconduct. Yeah. Cause and effect, yes. Yep.
Carl Jung says that there's such a thing as acausal events. Acausal. So what is the view on that? That means acausal events exist.
So I wouldn't go into that because I don't think there's any fruit in it. I think it's pointless to discuss that. If I were to put it very bluntly, right, if you don't believe in cause and effect, right, then don't bother coming here. There's no point. Don't bother coming here. Don't bother exercising. Don't bother doing anything. Because everything will happen anyway, right? And the Buddha himself actually said that if you don't believe in what was the exact term? If you don't believe that there is karma, right, there's cause and effect, right, then the holy life has got no point for you to live already. And it's true, because whatever you do, right, there's no fruit as a result of that, right? So, yeah, you could actually, I think that some of the later explanations of the worldview by some of the commentators, they would say things like, yeah, there are different categories, karma only like touches one part, there are like natural events and so forth, right, that are beyond like karma. I'm not sure about that. All I know is actually that pertaining to my own personal practice, there is a very clear cause and effect. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Brother Peijing. Thank you for sharing.
You.
On the part on the right effort that you have shared, right, you talk about choosing the right parents. And how do we actually do that? Is there such thing as able to choose the parent? Because we are...
Yeah, I am just planting
we can't
this.
choose to be born or die. These are 2 things we have no control, right? That's what we thought. And then secondly, on the right husband or wife, before marriage, we always think that the person's the best. It's after marriage, then we open both eyes that we see it, that we are asked to close both eyes, that we
Yeah.
Is it to change ourselves instead of, choosing the right person? We have to change. It's ourselves, it's within and not external.
Yeah. So yeah, delusion is strong, right? That's why romance has to happen in the dark. That's why Ajahn Brahma. Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So to your first question about choice, right? The increasing evidence that I have read from reading cases on rebirth, so like Children's Past Lives is like one book. It's written by an American Jewish author. Then Ian Stevenson's case studies, right? 20 cases of reincarnation and so forth. You actually get a sense that even in people who might not be from the Buddhist tradition, there is a sense of actually we do choose our parents. Yeah, we actually make our choices. It might not be visible now because you are born and you are of a later stage and so forth. So I'm saying all this, right, in the hope that in your future life, when you are about to choose your parents, you'll choose wisely in that situation. I don't know how exactly, okay, but that's actually the context of like why I say so. And to your question on the choice of a life partner, I will admit that that advice was very much targeted at people who have not made their choices in life partner. But for those of you who have already made your choices in life partner, you still have that choice. And your choice is actually how do you see that person, yoniso manasikara. How are you paying attention to the wholesome traits, or are you paying attention to the unwholesome traits? Are you trying to find faults and like pick the next fight, or are you appreciating the good things that this person has done? Yeah, that is actually where I would encourage those people who are already married to actually like practice your right effort. Right effort, right? Even though the effect is about increasing wholesome states, mental states, and decreasing unwholesome mental states. Right effort is not about willpower. It is about choosing how you see, and then actually like how do you make your choices accordingly. It's not about I have to force my mind to be like pure. Willpower has got no place in the Eightfold Path, actually. Yeah. The only willpower you need, right, is actually the willpower to stay committed to the path, the willpower to like bring yourself to the meditation seat and to sit down and then tell yourself, I'm going to sit for how long? Then after that, it's no willpower already. Yeah. Even in your daily life, it's actually more of the second factor, the Eightfold Path. The letting go, being kind, being gentle, that's actually the important thing, the effort. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? We have. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We have time for maybe a couple more questions.
You're talking about livelihood.
Yes.
I got a friend who's working at Changi Prison as a hangman. So he's thinking of stopping, you see. What would you be advice? He's a hangman at Changi,
Yeah.
His job.
I would actually say that from a Buddhist standpoint, he should probably change jobs. Yeah.
So I should advise him to stop.
Yeah, I actually think that would be one of the inadvisable jobs because, in effect, he's actually acting to kill. Yeah, and that's definitely not going to be very good for his mind, actually. Yeah.
Okay. One more last question before we go into some announcements. So we've discussed about good friendship, we've discussed about wines and, actually to make your heart healthy, right? Join BF Tai Chi and your heart could also be healthy. No need wine. Last question?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
By the way, the Buddha said that asking questions is the karma for wisdom. So that brother's very wise.
Thank you. Okay, just a follow-up from the question from the lady about choosing partners. Actually, when the reason why it's very difficult to choose a partner is because they're actually, although they are physically two person, there are actually four personality involved. Okay, which means that when you choose a partner, he will be what you want him to be. He's not him. He just be the person you want him to be. So similarly, she will also be the person that he wants him to be. So there are actually 4 persons involved. That's why it's very difficult to choose a partner, because when you after you married, the other person you want him to be disappeared, and he becomes the real person. And then similarly, you also disappeared, and you are the actual person all show up. And that's why it's very difficult to choose a partner. So what's your comment on this?
Yeah, my comment on that is actually that to keep it simple, and if I were to draw an analogy to how Ajahn Brahm allows like monastics to go into his monastery, right? It's actually a very convoluted process. So you go to Thailand, you can be a monk at literally 24 hours. You can be a fully ordained monk in 24 hours, right? But to be a monk in Bodhinyana Monastery in Down Under, you first have to be an anagami for 2 years. After you finish as an anagami for 2 years, right, then you actually will be a samanari. You wear brown robes, but you are keeping like you're not fully ordained at this point in time, right? Then I think it's like 6 months to a year where they will keep you, as a samanari. Only then, and only with the 100% consensus of the entire sangha, right, are you allowed to become a monastic. And I actually asked Ajahn, like, why is it so, one time I asked him, like, why is it so tough? Because other people are like, a lot more lax, right? And he said that he wants to actually allow a chance, right, both for the people to understand, who want to become monastics, to understand, like, what is it like, living there, and also to allow for the sangha to actually see how this person is like. It's a trial period in that sense. So romance is wonderful and so on and so forth. But I think that the important thing is actually maybe the way to go about this, to reduce from 4 people, reduce to 2 actual people in a relationship, is to have a trial period. Gradually increase maybe you live together, then you realize, this habit, it doesn't work for me and so forth. And then over time, then you decide, do you want to get married or not?
Okay, so interesting, Brother PJ. Seems like we have a lot of people seeking partners. Not sure.
Be ordained, don't get partners.
I was just reminded about one of the sutta from the Buddha that says that if you are looking for partners, there are also some qualities.
Right.
If you also may advise us on that.
I must confess I did not refer to that sutta when I chose my wife, so I can't hand in heart refer to that sutta.
I see. Okay. Well, any which ways, I think our time for question and answer is up. So, a little bit